What you doing here, nerd? Nerd?
You
Who'd
want
you come with? Where's she at? Can I call her out? Can I stick my tongue out of it?
her brother.
Our older two sisters are camping in the hither, thither, and yon, aren't they? I thought I saw pictures. I feel like wrinkling your shirt this morning. Y'all want to open to Genesis 37. We'll begin there in a little bit. Genesis 37. These tinted windows make it look kind of ominous out the back, but thank you, Lord, for the rain, right? Thank you, Lord, for the rain. Anything we need to make mention of before we get started with our Bible class this morning?
Chrissy's having a little bit of flair this weekend with her fever.
No, I thought we just passed all that nonsense.
Comes and goes.
Hey, Gimpy. Gimpy 2, you want to compete for the nickname? No. Man, it's good to see you.
It's good to be back.
Yes, ma'am. So y'all be mindful of Chrissy. She's having a fever flare. Those of you that know that she battled that pretty severely. When are you leaving? When are we getting ready to leave? Today? Can't come soon enough, can Mr. Billy? Come on. Y'all pray for Mr. Billy. Blessings abound. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. Talk about that later. All right, if we don't have anything, anybody else, anything super pressing? Mr. Looper, can I pick on you? I mean, you know how we like to pounce on our visitors around here. Can I pick on you to kick us up with a word of prayer? Sure.
Our Father in heaven, we thank you for all the many blessings that you give to us. As we start this a new day, your day, Father, we pray that we come before you with our hearts open and our minds open to learn, that we come before you with praises and with gratefulness for all the things that you do for us. We pray during this hour that we may study and we may grow, that we may always find the truth and the good things that you give to us through your word. Be with us. Be with all those who could not be here this morning. Help them to be better. Continue to bless your children. It's in your son's name we pray.
Amen. All right, we're in Genesis 37. We've been studying the genealogy of Jesus. We're going to study a little bit about Joseph this morning. Does anybody see any problems with that? We're studying the genealogy of Jesus, the line that he came through, and we're going to talk about Joseph this morning. Anybody see any problems with that? Matt? He's from the tribe. So I didn't know if anybody was going to catch that. I threw y'all a curveball. I just wanted to talk about Joseph in the midst of this. You know, he's still part of God's story, and he's still part of God's family, but is he part of the direct line of Jesus? He's not. Is he a foreshadowing of Jesus? Like you got types and antitypes and ones that come before? For example, what's going to happen to Joseph? What's his brothers going to do in just a couple of chapters? They're going to sell him as a slave. 20 pieces of silver. What was Jesus sold for? That's not just inflation, just so you know. That's not just inflation. Why 30 pieces of silver? The amount is different, but what's 30 pieces of silver? It's still the price of a slave. The amount is different, but the intent was exactly the same. So you got foreshadowing there. You've got one that delivers and saves a nation by one man being kind of sacrificed and going with. I mean, there's all kinds of parallels. So he's not in the genealogy. I was waiting to be called out on that by some of you Bible nerds this week. I'm thankful that I could just call myself out on that. I mean, you let me down. Everybody. I was like, you ain't part. Even Prissy, I would have expected it from. So
William's name is Joseph.
Well, there you go. All right, so I know he's not the genealogy, but he's the family of God, and it's just too good of a story, and we're already right here. So why not, just dip in here and talk a little bit about Joseph. Y'all all right with that? So all we have to do this morning is cover Genesis 37 through 50. Who wants to start reading? So what I might have to do instead is rely on some of your previous knowledge of who he is. I do want to start in 37 and read a little bit. And I want to read 1 through 11. This is 37, 1 through 11. That'll be enough to introduce our story to us. There's a couple things I want to pick out. Pay really attention to. Like verse 2 kind of tells a little bit, and then we're going to get a little flavor of young Joseph in some of this in here. So, Mr. Kevin, if you want to kick off with and do like 1 through 7, and then Shane, can I pick on you to do 8 through 11? So 1 through 7, and then 8 through 11.
Now Jacob dwelt in the land where his father was a stranger, in the land of Canaan. This is the history of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was feeding the flock with his brothers. And the lad was with the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives. Joseph brought a bad report of them to his father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age. Also he made him a tunic of many colors. And when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Now Joseph had a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him even more. So he said to them, "Please hear this dream which I have dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Then behold, my sheep arose and also stood upright. And indeed your sheaves stood all around and bowed down to my sheep."
His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream. This time the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind.
All right, so verse 2, this is the account of Jacob's line. Now, where we ended off last time was Jacob and Esau, Jacob finally getting to come home after being snookered by his family, his Laban's family. Finally gets away. We have that kind of dramatic meeting back with Esau where Lori Blue was wrong and publicly confessed her wrongness in front of everybody. And then we worked through that together. And so we've got that kind of very powerful kind of reunion that they've had. And then we didn't really get into the table. There's some ugly that we kind of skipped over and just kind of keep with the line. But we finally got Jacob here. We've got him, nearing kind of somewhat the end of his days. And now his children that he's had by the two wives that he was given and also by their handmaids. And we get introduced Joseph, who, like I said, his story is the story that carries us through the rest of the book of Genesis. He's kind of a big deal. Kind of a big deal. First impressions from this reading today. Let's start with verse 3. Have we encountered any drama with parental favoritism up to this point in our story.
Seems like it runs rampant that family.
Doesn't it though? I'm sure glad Daniel's not here for us to pick on. With Grandma here, we could just call somebody out about having a favorite grandchild or anything like that. I'm thinking, well, we can throw Caleb under the bus, I guess. I mean, do you get any love from Grandma? Have you ever had a strawberry cake made for you especially? Or is like he the only one? Or
Probably the only.
Yeah. I mean, I would hear that she would sometimes cook for you if Daniel was coming, is what I'd always been told. You know, just favoritism in the family. I mean, it's just, let's go ahead and have that kind of, we're just rolling it all out here for everybody to see, right? Holly, do you have a favorite?
Her nephews.
She said the nephews.
The nephews.
Alicia, you got a favorite back there? You want to go ahead and, Randy, you want to go ahead and just tell us which child of yours is the favorite this morning? We can just jump off right into this morning.
Well, he's the only one in here.
Oh, of course it's him then, because he's the only one. There you go. Family favorite. We've already had this issue, right? We already had it with Isaac and Rebecca, and now we've got Jacob carrying it on, and just some of those genetics run in there, and it creates some issues. Now, does Joseph do anything to kind of hurt his own cause with his brothers? What happens in verse 2 that he does? He's out there, and the brothers are working. He's the youngest one out of all of them. What does he bring back? What does he do? He's a tattletale, man. They weren't working like they were supposed to. They weren't doing this, they weren't doing that. So they already don't like them. And then you add, not only is Jacob showing favoritism, but let's just make the favoritism obvious with what? Let's get him let's just make it a beacon of favoritism. Now, what does Joseph do to not have, now remember he's 17. How old are you, Tyler Slaughter? Hey, Tyler? Knew we were close. What does he do to not help his cause? Hey, I had this dream, guys. What's the first one? I had this dream. Hey, guys, I had this dream, and we were all these grain sheaves, and guess what? Guess what? What happens? What'd you say, Miss Margie?
They were bowing down.
Man, mine stood up tall, and all the other ones just started bowing down to me. Isn't that neat, guys? Wow. Hey. By the way, like my tunic that Dad gave me and nobody else, you know? And then we go on, and what's the next? So we got this grain sheaves, and they're all bowing down to me. Then what's the next dream that he has? We got the sun, moon, and stars, and there's 11 of them. How many brothers are there? Pretty obvious who the sun and moon represents who? Mom and Dad, who's the 11 stars. And guess what they all did? Man, isn't that neat? And to the point that this one, what does Jacob do?
He takes it,
He counters it, but before he considers it, by the way, he kept the matter in mind, but before that, what does he do a little bit? He rebukes or scolds, depending on what your translation says there, like, hey, we're all, I mean, yeah.
Snitches get stitches.
Snitches get stitches, or braggarts get, I don't know, bruises. I don't know, but it's a foreshadowing of God blessing him with visions and dreams. Maybe in his 17-year-old youth doesn't, use it as wisely as he should or could. Some things are better left unsaid. Mr. David?
If we want to cut him some slack, most of the people you find having dreams given to them by God are very upset by it.
That's true.
Nebuchadnezzar is ready to kill everybody until somebody tells him what his dream was. Pharaoh,
The ones that Daniel gets have him where he loses all color and everything. He's ready to die.
So this may not be just, hey, I dreamed I was flying last night, and then today I dreamed it. This may be a something that he needs to tell.
Let's go ahead and foreshadow. Where is this story going? What is the foreshadowing of the bowing down that's going to take place? He's actually going to be. They're going to be bowing down, and the story bears that out. They will be, but it's a little bit different circumstances. How are y'all doing this morning? Would your babies like to go to class with kids about the same age? I mean, I know that's brand new, and if they don't, but we got a kids class or they want to stay with mom. Y'all, come on! I'm gonna take y'all out this side door over here. It's Miss it's Kim. It's not my wife, is it? Come on, but my daughter's in class too. I promise. Did you get soggy in the rain? Your lighty up shoes.
You're right.
Come on, I'll show you. Y'all can take a peek, and then you can decide if you want to come back to mom. Okay? Come here. It's raining out there. I didn't know. I had a vision. Hey, while I was out there, I had this dream that all of you guys bowed down to me. What have I done? What have I done? What have y'all done? So I had this dream while I was out there, and you guys were all bowing down to me. Isn't that kind of cool? Yeah. You see? For our vision, we're in Genesis 37. We're studying about Joseph having these visions of everybody bowing down to him and just, them not exactly taking. David, I didn't mean to cut off your thought, but it is. It's God telling you something. Like I said, a lot of times it's disastrous and awful, and so this is actually good news. And it's going to be, but Joseph's life, how would you characterize it from your previous knowledge? He's going to have them bowing down to him. How's that road look to get him there? It's a pretty rough road. So we transition from that. Now, it does interesting, like the way Lori kind of pointed out, verse 11. His brothers were jealous, but his father kept the matter in mind. Like he kind of tucked that away, like, this is interesting. Not once, but twice he has this same kind of vision. And yeah, it doesn't sit well with all of us, but God works in amazing ways. We roll into verse 12, and now they're out pasturing the flocks, and he's going to go and check on his brothers again. And what plot do they come up with? What's the first plot? Yeah, what's the brothers' first plan as they see their brother approaching? What are they going to do? What's the first plan? Kill him. Look at verse 18. They saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. What do they say, verse 19? Here comes the dreamer. Come now, let's kill him and throw him in one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal devoured him. Who's the one brother that kind of takes up for him? Where's he fall in line? You got one of the oldest. Now, Joseph's second from the bottom. He's not the youngest. Benjamin's the youngest. But you got Reuben, who is the oldest. He hears this and tries to rescue him. Said, let's not take his life. Let's not shed any blood. Reuben, he's going to go throw him in the pit. And then it tells you in verse 22, Reuben's plan was to go back later and rescue him and bring him back to his dad. So that's big brother, looking out for little brother. And you kind of got to give that guy a little bit of credit, right?
Well, he's a little older. He's got a little more maturity about it. He thinks about it.
That's right.
What his dad.
I mean, if the youngest of them 17 and Reuben's first, we don't know exactly the breaking down of between the ages, but there's a good chance he's at least 10 or more years older than him. So he's a little bit more seasoned. Now, so they decide they're not gonna kill him, but he does come in verse 23, and what do they do with the robe? I mean, they tear it off of him, which it's still traumatic, right? They're not going to kill him, but you process this as the youngest brother. Older brother's being pretty harsh. They rip the robe off of him. They throw him into the cistern. There's no water in the bottom of it. And they sit down to eat their meal, and what do they notice off in the distance? A caravan is coming. A caravan of Ishmaelites in verse 25. And so which brother's idea is it to sell him? Interestingly, Judah, which is the tribe that you said that we're going to eventually get Jesus from. What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover it up? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay hands on him. After all, he is our brother. Yeah, hey, he's our brother. Maybe we don't want to kill him after all. So they're coming around. And verse 28 is where they sell him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites. And where do they take him off to? To Egypt. And that's going to come into play big time in our story. Now, we're going to just kind of really rush through this, but how do they break the news to Dad? What do they do to Dad? All right, she said, take the cloak, they cover it in blood, and
They tore it all up.
and what's the story? The ferocious animal came and got your son. He recognizes it's his son Rob, and he mourns for days, and they all try to comfort him. And he says in verse 35, I'll continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave. And so his father wept for him. And the very last verse of 37, the Midianites sold Joseph to Egypt, to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. So God, brothers got a plan. This is what happens to him. Now we've got him off in Egypt. We're going to skip the Judah and Tamar story in chapter 38. Not that it's not worthy of our story, but it doesn't really fit with what we're doing today. Skip over to 39. Chapter 39, verse 1. Joseph's now been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. And what do we learn in verse 2 as far as God working through Joseph here? And how does that benefit Potiphar here? What's the scenario?
He's a good worker. He does a really job with the Lord. That's the thing that makes him prosper.
Why is Joseph able to continue to do a good job, and why is Joseph prospering?
I will bless those that bless you. Curse those.
There it is. God is working through Joseph, and so everything he's touching is turning to gold. And so as God continues to bless him, because he's in Potiphar's household, Potiphar recognizes, man, this is working out really well for me. Very similar to the story of Daniel. Again, as God blesses Daniel and God blesses the Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, the king continues to do well. Verse 3, when his master saw that that's what's interesting to me. Egyptians, typically Yahweh followers. But Potiphar recognized, that jumps out to me, and I highlighted it here in verse 3. When his master saw the Lord was with him. Do you have Lord in all caps there? What does that mean? What's Lord in all caps mean?
God.
God. Yes, ma'am, Miss Margie. She was pointing. I thought you were raising your hand. She's pointing. That's the Yahweh. That's the Jehovah name. Very similar to the story of Jonah. When the waves are rocking and rolling, those sailors who are scared for their life on that boat are praising and praying to Jehovah, Lord in all caps. So here you've got a guy that has no reason to, but he sees something. It doesn't go into detail how he knows, but it tells us Potiphar recognizes God is with this young man. That is amazing. Any applications there about your example and how you live? And how we allow God, and we invite and ask God to work through us? Not just for evangelism, but let God work through me in the way I work my job. Let God work through me in the way I conduct myself in the community, in my marriage. Like, people will recognize the Lord is with this guy. And the Lord gave him success in everything he did. And so as a result of that, verse 4, Joseph found favor in Potiphar's eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household. He entrusted to his care everything he owned. And verse 5, from the time he put him in charge of his household and of all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. That's just kind of too cool to rush past, in my opinion. It's God working through Joseph and blessing this household. I love that. And if you don't see any application, grab a hold of that and see the same potential in yourselves. So, verse 6, Potiphar leaves everything he had in Joseph's care. And with Joseph in charge, how does your version read at the end of verse 6? With Joseph in charge, what? What did Potiphar have to worry about? Why are you laughing there, Mr. Chandler?
He was hanging out.
I mean, I don't know how your verse is. He did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. What does Potiphar have to worry about? He's got to eat, and that's about it. Because everything else, Joseph's taken care of, and it's working out. I mean, that's just kind of neat to me. Kind of neat to me there. Now, you find out at the end of verse 6, Joseph was well-built and handsome. You want an example of that? Right? No, maybe not. Maybe not. What happens? What's the left turn? So everything's, he's having these visions. It's a wonderful story, and his brothers hate him and they sell him off. And he gets there, and now his candle's starting to shine a little bit. God's working through him. Everything's going great in Potiphar's house. And what's the left turn that's going to happen? Potiphar's wife. Potiphar's wife. She takes notice of Joseph, and the invitation is in verse 7. Lie with me. Come to bed with me. And he refuses. With me in charge, he told her, my master doesn't concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one's greater in this house than I am. My master's withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against Potiphar? God. Isn't that interesting? He sees the hand of God in his own life. Why would I want to mess this up and sin against God who's done all this for me? I think that's powerful. Any thoughts about that? Go ahead, Bill.
How old is he?
17-ish?
So
18-ish? Maybe about it.
apparently, Jacob did his job.
Yeah. I don't know. You can have wicked fathers that have righteous sons, but it does turn out with this guy. Well, look at the older ones. The older brothers aren't all that wonderful. I mean, one of the stories we skipped over is the sister gets raped. What do Levi and Judah do? Hey, we can't give you our sister unless you're circumcised like us. And while they're recovering from that, what do they go down there and do? They wipe out all of them. So
It's been my experience that bad kids can come from good families,
that's it.
but good kids have an exposure somewhere.
That's right. I mean, I'll give the credit wherever it's due. I'm going to give it to the Lord in this one. It's hard for that. Jacob has not been like, Jacob is dad number one. Maybe so. I'll give it to him a little bit. But it is, to your point, it is mightily impressive that with no reason to be, he's got a set of morals that's pretty powerful. Ms. Blooper?
Maybe this speaks about the Rachel.
Possibly. Remind you of any other story where young men have no reason to be faithful to the laws that they were? Daniel jumps out of this. They get their land gets conquered, and they get taken 900 miles away, and they still, and at no reason to, they follow the dietary laws. Everybody else is eating what's being offered, and they say, hey, we can't. It just there's a set of morals that stay with this young man. How could I do this and sin against God? How often does Miss Potiphar mess with it? Every day. Verse 10, and though she spoke to Joseph day after day. And I just want you to put yourself in here. He is a young man. I'm going to guess that she's attractive. And, sometimes, or a lot of times, servants didn't have these kind of privileges to engage in some of that. You don't know but day after day to get that pressure, and who's going to know? Who's going to find out? And yet, day after day, won't do it. In fact, the one time, as the verses go on, the one time she happens to catch him in the house with nobody else around, what happens? She gets a little more aggressive. Grabs a hold of him by his tunic, come to bed with me, and what does he end up doing? He runs away with the tunic still in hand. He just gets out of there. Huh? You ain't kidding.
God testing him, showing him you can be strong in
That's
times of trials.
That's it. And is he going to need that?
He had to be. He was a young man, and I'm sure she was a pretty woman.
And he says no day after day, and run to the point of having to run away. Nobody's around. Who's going to know? God would know. God would know. And so he runs away, and then now she realizes she's frustrated by that, or now, she's got the evidence here. And so what story does she tell? Yeah, woman scorned. What does she tell? What story does she tell?
She went away from him.
It was all oh man, this Hebrew, verse 14, has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. Right. And when he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. And so she kept it till Mr. Potiphar came home. And then she tells the story in verse 17, that Hebrew slave you brought to us came to make sport of me. And then obviously, Mr. Potiphar, when you hear your wife almost got taken advantage of, what's your reaction going to be? He's pretty hot. He burned with anger, verse 19. And so what happens to Joseph? He gets thrown in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. Now, one more time, middle of verse 20. But while Joseph was there in prison, what? Verse 21. The Lord is with him. Lord was with him in the visions. Lord was with him when the brothers things going on. Lord's with him now. Miss Brittany?
I know it doesn't say this, but every time I read and heard this story, I feel like there's a whole part left to the imagination. So he gets thrown in prison, but Potiphar probably had to have approached him, like had his guards bring him in and be like, "What's going on, dude?" And it's interesting that he didn't get put to death.
I say, why didn't he? Because if I'm Potiphar and have that power, I thought the same thing.
Because Potiphar trusted him so much. And maybe he threatened, I'm going to put you in, you're going to die. But then she's like, maybe that's, not a punishment that this is the crime. So anyway, he got put in prison, but he didn't
get killed. Well, and what possibly lending credibility to your story, what did we read that Potiphar recognized about Joseph? That God was with him. Is somebody that's been righteous and done everything the man has asked for. I have always similarly wondered if he didn't have suspicions that this was his wife and not Joseph.
And then it makes you wonder what was their marriage like after that. Because, if he trusted Joseph so much, I don't know. It's just there's a whole part that we don't get.
You know what? We'll ask him when we get there. How'd that go? How was the harmony in the home? Because now with Joseph gone, I wonder if his stuff continues to be blessed. I mean, y'all know the old adage: finding good help is, good help is hard to find, and he just lost it. The whole reason why his house is prospering and blessing livestock and family is why, because Joseph was there. Now Joseph's not there. You don't think that light bulbs went off? I think you're. It's not. We're not told, but I don't think that's outside the purview of possibility. Even in prison, the Lord is with him, and God shows him kindness and grants him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So God is still blessing this young man. And so, one more time, in 22, he becomes the lead trustee. What's the warden do with him? He can put him in charge of everything he wants to put him in charge of, and everything goes well. And one more time, verse 23, the warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success. All Potiphar had to worry about is eating. And now the prison warden says, well, my job just got a whole lot easier because I can give everything to Joseph and I know it's going to get taken care of. I have to, because I've got a 17-year-old youngin in this, whatever, but I'm telling you, all of the things in the book of Ephesians about how it's said to slaves with their masters, but we're told to work as if you're working for the Lord. No, it's not a certainty, but I feel very strongly about the fact that if you will go to work at your secular job and work not as if you're working for your boss, whether you got a good one or a bad one, if you'll go and conduct yourself on that job site as if God himself was there and Jesus was your boss, I am convinced that most of the time, how's that going to work out for you? You think you got people that come in and go above and beyond on the job site? When the norm is to not work when the boss isn't watching you, doesn't Scripture speak exactly to that? Don't just work when the boss is looking at you. You work all the time. Don't steal time. Don't be lazy on the job site. Don't steal, equipment. Don't charge that. when you conduct yourself as a Christian on the job site, I am convinced, and no, it's not a certainty, and people get passed over, and I realize politics happen everywhere, but in general, when you work like you're a Christian, how's that going to go for you most of the time? You're going to be blessed. And then it comes time for promotion. Again, I know that there's exceptions to the rule, and people have been taken advantage of it. Most of the time, when I'm looking for somebody to promote, it's the guy that's been doing right, working hard, going above and beyond. People recognize stuff like that.
I once worked for a lawyer who was not regarded as a very moral person, but he went out of his way to hire Christians to work for him because he learned from his father, who was a farmer, that Christians believe rightfully that it's a sin not to give it your all.
That's right. I mean, that's just free life advice I'm just throwing out there. Don't be like everybody else. I mean, we're called to be lights, and a lot of times we think that we only apply that to evangelism. Folks, that's everything. The way you conduct yourself at work, the way you conduct yourself in the restaurant, the waiter and waitresses, the way you conduct yourself, period, can be a reflection of God is with you or not. And it gets recognized. I love this about Joseph, that God keeps working through him, and people recognize about him. He keeps getting put in charge. Put in charge of Potiphar's house, put in charge of the prison, where he's eventually going to be put in charge of Pharaoh's house. It's just, but he is being trained and qualified for that through these experiences, and they're kind of negative. Every time life knocks him down, God works through him and he raises to the top. And so God is training this young man. God is working with this young man, and to his credit, he never. Wouldn't there be some temptation to give up on life if you're Joseph? I mean, every time stuff starts to go his way, what happens? Slap back now. My father loves me. Things are going well. I got this tunic, whatever. Whammo. I get sold off, and what a tragedy. And I finally start digging up out of that, and God's with me, and I'm in Potiphar's house, and whammo, now I'm in prison. But he never quits. So as he's in prison, he meets two individuals. This is where the king's servants and slaves are, people that got in trouble. What two other people have found themselves in prison? What's their job? We don't get their names, we get their job titles. What's their job titles? The baker and the cupbearer. They're both in prison as well. Pharaoh is angry with them. This is chapter 40 and verse 2. And they've been put in jail here, and they're in the same prison that Joseph's in. And the captain of the guard has assigned them to Joseph, and he is attending to them. And after they've been in custody for some time, my version says at the end of verse 4, not told exactly how long that is. Say it again. A season, yeah, however long that is. Okay. All right. They start having dreams. And the first one, the cupbearer and the baker, they have a dream the same night, and each has a meaning of its own. Joseph comes to them, verse 6, they're dejected, and so he's going, what's going on here? Why do you look so sad today? Well, verse 8, we both had dreams, but there's nobody to interpret them. And Joseph's response at the end of verse 8 is what? Who do interpretations belong to? Everything about Joseph, who's he giving the glory and credit to? God. And you're going to see that. This isn't the only place that's going to keep popping up. So tell me your dream. Why would he? That would seem kind of bold, right? Interpretation belong to God. Tell him to me. Why would he have any thought? I mean, does that mean him being presumptuous? Or why could he even make such a bold statement? Where does this take us back to? The very first ones he had of his own dreams early on. So verse 9, the chief cupbearer says, in my dream there was this vine in front of me, and the vine where there was these 3 branches, and it budded, and it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, and I squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand. And what does that end up meaning? The 3 branches meant 3 days. Pharaoh's going to call you up, and what's going to happen to you? You're squeezing the grapes into his cup, and you put the cup into his hand. What's that going to mean? You're going to get your job back. Pharaoh's going to restore you to your position, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. What does he ask in verse 14? Hey, when you get promoted, Remember your boy. You know, hey, I told you what the dream meant. I'm easing your mind a little bit. When you get there, remember your buddy. Remember your buddy when you get there. Remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh. Get me out of this prison. I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in the dungeon. He's pleading as I'm innocent. I've not done anything to be in prison. Now, that's the cupbearer. Baker said, oh, that worked out well. Well, let me tell you my dream. And that was favorable. Let me tell you mine. I've got 3 baskets of bread, and in the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head. Now, come on, man. Birds are eating the bread out of the basket on your head. Well, the 3 baskets refers to 3 days. Then 3 days, Pharaoh's going to, Mr. John Henry gave me this signal back here. He's going to lift your head and impale your body on a pole, and the birds will eat away at your flesh. Yee! Maybe I don't want to know. Ignorance is bliss, buddy. Give me 3 days without having to think about this. Verse 20, the 3rd day, it's Pharaoh's birthday. He gives a feast for all of his officials. Lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restores the chief cupbearer to his position. So once again, he put the cup in Pharaoh's hand, but he impaled the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. Verse 23, the last verse of 40, what happens? The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph, he forgot. Now, can we give him some grace? His life has been restored. I mean,
I was going to ask, would God continue to bless Joseph if he didn't tell the baker
the truth. That's true.
the interpretation?
Very possible. He's got to give him the truth. He's got to right, wrong, good or bad. You know, in season and out of season, he tells them what the vision was. At first, cupbearer does not remember. All right, we'll pick up here because we're out of time, but I just want you to see chapter 41, verse 1. How long passes when his buddies leave him and had forgot about it? 2 years. He's still in prison, in a dungeon. Now he's promoted, but he's still not his own man for another 2 years. Just weigh on that. Let that marinate a little bit, and we'll pick up there in a little bit. Pharaoh's going to have a vision, and we'll pick up from there.
You didn't have anybody